There are more seats up here, if anybody. I know that everybody wants to be Jewish and only be in the back, but there are some seats up here. And as we begin, I would like to remind you, if you have a phone or something that's going to ring, if you could shut that off, it would be wonderful. O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and to give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then seems to cease. Whence the melody, and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life, and the answer to all its mysteries. I begin with a psalm. Psalm 20, a psalm of hope. Psalm that was said all of last week, and we have other psalms that are appropriate for today, but this too is appropriate. For the conductor, a psalm of David. Adonai will answer you on a day of trouble. The name of God of Jacob will set you high and safe from danger. God will send you help from the sanctuary, aiding you from Zion. God will remember all your grain offerings and will consider all your holy burnt sacrifices as though they were made of pure fat. That's supposed to be good. Selah. God will grant you whatever your heart wishes and make right all the advice you give. We shall rejoice in your salvation, expressing our joy by praising God's name. Adonai will fulfill all your requests. Now I know that Adonai has saved the anointed one of God and will answer him from holy heaven with the redemptive might of the divine right hand. Some trust in chariots and others in horses, but we shall always recall the saving might of the name of Adonai our God. Those others will bend and fall, whereas we shall rise up and remain ever strong. O Adonai, save us. May sovereign God answer us on the days we call out. Also from the Psalms, Psalm 121. Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo ezri Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim v'aretz ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim v'aretz. A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and guard your life. Adonai guards your going and coming, now and forever. Yalai, nai, 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 I lie, 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 lie. Yai, lie, 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 lie. Yai, lie, 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 lie. There's a poem written by the poetess Zelda from Israel. And it's called Everyone Has a Name. Everyone has a name given to him by God and given to him by his parents. Everyone has a name given to him by his stature and the way he smiles, and given to him by his clothing. Everyone has a name given to him by the mountains and given to him by the walls. Everyone has a name given to him by the stars and given to him by his neighbors. Everyone has a name given to him by his sins and given to him by his longing. Everyone has a name given to him by his enemies and given to him by his love. Everyone has a name given to him by his holidays and given to him by his work. Everyone has a name given to him by the seasons and given to him by his blindness. Everyone has a name given to him by the sea and given to him by his death. And from Psalm 15, a Psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity. Do what is right. Speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue, nor do evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor, nor spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates. Accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then you shall stand firm forever. Psalm 23. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai rohi lo echzar, bino deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yanachaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begetz amavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha Shivtecha umishantecha hemaya nachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai dishanta vashemen roshi dishanta vashemen roshi dishanta vashemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai Vishavti beveit Adonai Vishavti beveit Adonai Leorech Yamim Yalalai lai 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 Yalalai lai 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 Yalalai lai 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 Yadai Yalalai lai 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 Yalalai lai 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 Yai nai nai Yai lai lai. A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. Adonai leads me beside the still waters. Adonai restores my soul. Adonai guides me in straight paths for Adonai's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And a final reading from our philosopher Ben Sira. Fear not death, for we are all destined to die. We share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Cry for the dead. Hide not your grief. Do not restrain your mourning, but remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory be a source of peace, and be consoled when the soul departs. For death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest is better than constant sickness. Let us not seek to understand what is too difficult for us, nor search for what is hidden, nor be preoccupied with what is beyond, for we have been shown more than we can comprehend. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore are our few days in eternity. The good things in life last for a short time, but a good reputation endures forever. I think that I just realized why it is that our services start out with a lot of readings. As long as the words are on the page, we have words. And once we move to the words in our hearts, it gets messed up or confused or too much or too little. Just never feels right. We are all here today to celebrate a life that we actually never thought would ever leave us. Maybe some thought, but I didn't. And a person so filled with life and so filled with zest, with laughter. We'll all talk about this for a long time today and then forever. But it's pretty impossible to think of Charlie Miller not being here, which is why I believe denial is a very wonderful thing. So I invite you to do whatever you need to do, and there is no judgment on my part. Charlie was so full of life and so present in so many places. First of all, as I was picking readings, I was telling the family this, as I was picking readings, it felt like every single reading had something to do with Charlie. And so, believe it or not, I culled them back a little bit. But we don't need to cull the speakers back a little bit, because it's mostly family and an esteemed colleague, friend, and partner. And I know lots of us have our own stories, and that's one of the reasons for 7 days of Shiva, is that we can tell our stories and continue to tell stories. So the very first person I'd like to invite up to share her reflections, to eulogize Charlie, is Joan Fortin, the CEO of Bernstein Shore, a good friend and personal choice of Charlie's, and we're honored to have you here. It's not that Rabbi is so special, it's that this is, and there's a lot of them.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
And you probably have to lean into how to do this.
Good morning. My name is Joan Fortin, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Bernstein Shore. I've been with Bernstein Shore for over 25 years, and for every single solitary one of those days, Charlie Miller was my colleague. Over time, Charlie became my teacher, my mentor, my personal champion, and my friend. I loved him intensely, as so many of us did. It is an unbelievable honor to speak about him today. There's so much I could say about Charlie's impressive legal career and his deep passion for social and legal justice, but I thought I would use my time this morning to give his family a gift from me, and to all of you, which is a brief glimpse into the wonderful world of what it was like to work with our beloved Charlie Miller. Charlie loved being a lawyer. He loved coming to work every day. I've never known anyone who loves going to work more than Charlie. He brought joy and happiness with him always. He was the most positive, giving person many of us have ever met in our entire profession. Greeting Charlie at any time of day was a special treat. His answer was always the same and guaranteed to lift your spirits no matter what kind of day you were having. It went something like this. "Hello, Charlie, how are you today?" Charlie's response, in his big, booming voice, was always, and I mean always, "I'm terrific!" It was impossible not to smile when Charlie greeted you. Charlie first joined Bernstein Shore in 1979, but in 1978, he was the hot top recruit at the University of Maine, at the University of Maine School of Law. Our senior shareholder, Lenny Nelson, recalls it this way. "My memory of our quest to secure Charlie for BSSN occurred in the fall of his third year of law school. Charlie had a wonderful personality and was scheduled to graduate at the top of his class. Barney Schur and I took Charlie to dinner and regaled him of all the benefits of coming to work with us at the firm. We were very impressed with his in-between years, meaning the years following Colby College when he met his beloved Ellie, where he was teaching at a public high school in central Maine and guiding his high school debate team to many statewide and regional championships. Lenny says, we were successful in our mission, and Charlie became one of the transformative lawyers in the emerging reputation of Bernstein Scher. Charlie never stopped being a teacher and a coach. Once at Bernstein Scher, Charlie built what became one of the most preeminent real estate practice groups in the Northeast. He created a virtual army of lawyers by taking it upon himself personally to teach and mentor each new person who came through the group, meeting with them one-on-one each week. When Bill Welch's turn came around, he referred to his training time as Tuesdays with Charlie. For 3 years, Charlie sat with Bill every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. to discuss real estate law. Charlie told his mentees that one day everything would just click and they would no longer feel the need to meet with him anymore. When one person self-graduated out of Charlie's program, he would move on to the next person in line. After he stepped down as CEO, Charlie turned his amazing mentoring talents to senior associates and young shareholders from across the firm, and he personally worked with them and helped them be prepared to transition into full equity shareholders of the firm. Charlie always cared about much more than just our legal work. In the process of mentoring us, he was interested in learning all about our families. If your children were lucky enough to run into Charlie in the office, they were rewarded with a huge half-dollar coin, which he would produce with absolutely no warning because, ready for this? He kept several in his pocket every single day in case someone came by with children. My daughter reminded me the other day, she is a beneficiary and has one of Charlie's coins. While Charlie learned about our families, he told us all about his own. He was so proud of his children, Mark, Elizabeth, and Amanda. And later, his beloved children, Eitan, Talia, Danny, Emily, Judah, and Maya. We all knew them by name, and we knew where they were, and we even got to meet them sometimes when they came in to visit the office. And still, at this very moment today, Charlie's office door is literally covered top to bottom in 8.5 by 11-inch color photographs of his 6 grandchildren. Getting back to Charlie's real estate practice, I have to thank Jamie Schwartz for the following story. Jamie says, Charlie, the biggest fan of commercial real estate leases that perhaps ever strode the earth, could talk forever about leases, their features, their nuances, their impacts. One might think a commercial real estate lease could actually live, walk, and breathe when Charlie spoke so reverently about its heart and soul. In fact, deep in the well of his paper-packed office today remain Charlie's half-dozen beloved lease clause binders. Yes, lease clauses. Hundreds and hundreds of them, written by him, written by others, but carefully curated, categorized, and indexed by Charlie over more than 4 decades, kept because his great mind found them artful or clever, or just as he would say, beautiful. So old are some, they are actually cut out of paper and glued or taped to 8.5-inch pages, now yellowed with age. Go into his office and ask a question about a thorny lease issue, and Charlie would grin, turn, pull out the paper binder holding the answer. I have just what you need here, my friend. And he did, always. Charlie embodied in his legal career the old saying, you can disagree without being disagreeable. He practiced across the table from scores of talented lawyers and business people from all around the country. and he fought for his clients' interests zealously, practically, and with a thoroughness and thoughtfulness that was enviable. But there was no one who didn't like Charlie Miller, even if they were pummeled and outmaneuvered and eventually agreed to everything Charlie asked for. Many of his opposing clients became his clients, and then they became his friends. Charlie had decades-long relationships and deep friendships with his many clients. There's nothing he wouldn't do to help them, including performing their weddings, supporting them through personal tragedy, and helping to steward their businesses on to the next generation. One client told me earlier this year that his children and grandchildren know Charlie as Uncle Charlie, and even they would call Charlie if they had a legal issue. All of us who were close to Charlie, and there were many of us, know that Charlie had our back when it really mattered and would hold us up with praise for the world to see. It is impossible to summarize the stories I've heard in the last week, so I thought I would share two of my own to illustrate how glorious it was to have Charlie's light shining on you. I got to know Charlie well after he became our managing shareholder in 2004. I already knew he was a fierce advocate for our clients, but I quickly learned that Charlie was also a fierce advocate for his people. Early in my shareholder years, I had a busy practice, a demanding client that had become the firm's largest client at that time. I had 2 children under 5, a husband who was a litigator at Pine Tree Legal Assistance, and I was serving on a community board. Charlie caught wind that I was struggling, so he stopped by my office and asked how I was doing. I didn't know Charlie that well yet, but I answered honestly, and I told him that I felt like I was failing at everything. Charlie not only convinced me that I wasn't failing, but he also offered to fire our firm's largest client if it would make me happy. And I could tell that he meant it. I said, "Charlie, we can't do that." And Charlie told me that I was more important to the future of the firm than any client, and he would personally fire that client that day if I wanted him to do so. We didn't fire the client, but from that day forward, I would have walked through fire for Charlie Miller without a second's hesitation. Charlie was an unbelievable champion for many of us also. By 2008, I had become the firm's director of attorney recruiting and worked very closely with Charlie. Even though I'd been practicing for 12 or 13 years by that time, in my heart, I was still just a kid from a dairy farm in Benton, Maine. But Charlie saw something different in me. And with some regularity, he would introduce me to someone new with that big beaming smile, and he would pronounce that I was brilliant and the next CEO of Bernstein Sure. After each counter, I would always say, "Charlie, please stop doing that. It's not true and it's embarrassing." He would just smile and say, "But it is true, Joan." And then he intentionally set out to do everything he possibly could to prepare me for the job that I now hold because of him. I share these stories to give you a flavor of what he did for so many of us. Time and time again, Charlie would hold one of us up and proclaim our greatness to the world, make us feel special in different and completely authentic ways. And he would always, unfailingly, tell us how proud he was for whatever it was we had just done. None of us ever grew too old or too important to stop glowing under Charlie's earnest praise. I could go on indefinitely about what Charlie meant to us personally and what he meant to our law firm, but I will close with this from my dear friend Jamie Schwartz, who so aptly captures the legacy that Charlie leaves behind. Picture a lake on a lovely Maine autumn morning. Picture a single stone falling into the middle of the lake and the circular ripples the stone causes in the still water. Those ripples would, absent the shores of the lake and gravity, conceivably go on forever. Now, picture hundreds of stones falling all over the lake simultaneously, and imagine the ripples they would cause. The ripples meeting other ripples and overlapping and crisscrossing endlessly, meeting new ripples and forming even their own ripples on ripples. Now think of those stones as Charlie Miller's touch on each of our lives and the lives of thousands of other people who met him or who were affected by his generosity, his kindness, his smarts, his care and advice, his mentoring, his teaching, his beautiful smile. The ripples endure, moving ever outward. They reach places Charlie could not imagine, reach people he did not ever meet, and yet reach them they do. For so many stones, so many ripples, so many people, all of us in our friends, colleagues, clients, spouses, strangers we meet, touched by Charlie, his influence, his love for humankind, his optimism, his honesty, his joy, his zealousness in everything we ever saw him do. A legacy that cannot truly be measured, because we cannot possibly gather the testimony of all the people his ripples reached and will reach still. Thank goodness for him, for Charlie. For we and countless others who are out there touched by the ripples, we are better, more filled with goodness, kindness, decency, and human skills, thanks to him. We will remember Charlie. We will do our best to continue his good works, and we will celebrate a life well lived, filled with love, kindness, and joy.
Are people a little chilly? Is it cold? Are you comfortable? Comfortable, okay. I would like to invite his children, Amanda, Liddy, and Mark, forward.
We knew it was going to be very tough, but after that, it's going to be really, really tough. First, we'd like to thank everyone for their grace, kindness, compassion, support during this extremely difficult time for our family. We received so many messages from so many people, and we are eternally grateful. One message that we received from Jamie Schwartz seemed particularly fitting for this moment, and I almost thought it was already going to have been read, but it wasn't. If every person whose life was touched, whose heart was lifted, whose pain was lessened, whose smile was widened by Charlie were here today, we would need a stadium or a city to gather in. While we may not have a stadium, we have a great representation of people our dad loved and who loved him. My sisters and I had a few things we wanted to share with all of you about our dad, and my sister Liddy will start us off.
I really keep wishing my father were here to give me a hug. This is hard. As my brother just shared, and from the number of people in both of these rooms, you know how much our father meant to so many people. One of the many lessons he taught us was that if someone made the effort to call him at the office, he would make that same effort to return every single call and respond, in the same day. If you came to him, he would prioritize your need. And it's true, he would. But as his children, we never had any doubt but that we were also the priority. If we called his office, we would be put through to him, period. I remember the drill. Someone would answer the phone, and I would say, "Hi, it's Liddy. It's not urgent. If he's in a meeting, he can call me back." And they would say, "He told me that if you ever call, I need to interrupt him and let him know." A beat would pass while they spoke to him, and then I would be put through, no matter what he was doing. We knew that we and our mother were the priority, always. And I can think of so many times that I would call him as a kid and as an adult, and he would answer the phone, "Hey, Lyd." And if that meant he needed to work late into the night to circle back and make sure everyone's need was met, he would do that. He loved being a lawyer. He loved giving of himself to the community. And we always knew that he loved us most of all. There's a song that was written by one of the members of a Jewish group called Safam for their father that we felt fit him to a T, and I'm going to try and recite it to you now. "Oh, the man was not a saint, because no mortal man can be, but the man he was the kind I've tried so very hard to be. For he said it does not matter what you earn or where you live, for a man he is remembered by the way that he would give. And the man he was a giver, and he gave with all his heart, that it pained him so to take, because he loved the giving part. So I give to you, my father dear, in sad memoriam, that this man, he is a better man, for knowing he's your son. And that carries for each one of us. The three of us are immeasurably better people because we're Charlie Miller's children."
As most, if not all of you know, my dad was a great orator. And while I won't speak for my sisters here, I am not. But I do have a few short stories to tell you, and I think they speak for themselves. Story number one. For many, many years, our dad used to play a part in the annual Purim spiel. For those of you who don't know, this is a comical and sometimes musical telling of the Purim story, where the heroes, Esther and Mordecai, prevail over the evil Haman. Ever the ham, our dad preferred to play the villain, Haman, complete with black cape and hat. At the end of the story, Haman is apprehended and led off to face justice. Cantor Messerschmidt would direct and conduct, playing the piano right here in front of the bima. One year, as we came to the end of the spiel, and the king's soldiers came to take Haman away, something different happened. With a twinkle in his eye and a wink to the congregants watching, our dad, in perfect character, turned and ran to the front of the bima, stepped onto the piano, jumped over Cantor Messerschmidt, ran up the aisle and out the door. Now, I know that's hard to imagine now, but I know some of you were here and will remember the year that Haman got away. Story number two. When I came back to Portland after I graduated from college and spent a year in Israel, I wanted to get some experience in marketing and advertising. I sent out letters to local ad agencies and PR firms, and one of them invited me in for an interview. As always, I talked to my parents before going in. My dad said, "Just so you know, one of the partners of this firm was involved in a pretty bitter business breakup earlier, and I represented the other side. If it does come up, I'm not sure how he's going to react." I said, okay, and went off to the interview. Sure enough, I met with the partner who had been involved in the litigation. We talked, and eventually he asked, "Does your family live in the area?" I said, "Yes." He asked what they do. I said, "My mom works for Pine Tree Legal." He said, "Oh, that's great. And how about your dad?" I said, "He's an attorney." "Nice. Is he still practicing?" "Yes." "Which firm?" "Bernstein, Schur, Sawyer, and Nelson." "Oh, you don't say." Then a flicker of recognition crossed his face, and he said, "Wait, you're Mark Miller? Is his name Charlie Miller?" "Yes." He turned and chuckled, mostly to himself, and then turned back to me and said, "A number of years ago, I was involved in a pretty bitter dispute with a former partner. And your dad beat me up pretty good." I decided then and there, if I were ever again in a dark alley, I would want Charlie Miller standing behind me and not in front of me, blocking my path. "Tell your old man I didn't kick you out of here on your ass." Excuse me, Rabbi. I got the job. Story number 3. And let me preface this by saying I have a wonderful relationship with my mother-in-law, who is sitting right here, Nechama, and I know Andy and Jordan have wonderful relationships with our mom. Now the story. When my mother's mother, Grandma Rose, Zichrona Lebracha, passed away, my mother didn't want to speak at the funeral service. So my father gave the eulogy. It was strong, detailed, and loving, and really represented the grandmother that I knew. My sisters and I also spoke at the funeral, and afterwards, when the rabbi came back to the bima, he remarked on how unusual it was in this day and age for grandchildren to speak at their grandmother's funeral, and particularly for a son-in-law to have such a warm and loving relationship with his mother-in-law. But that was my father, speaking for any of us when we didn't have the words, and building strong relationships with seemingly unlikely partners, like my grandmother, his mother-in-law. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
So first things first, I may not be able to adhere to the public speaking instructions my father always gave me for class presentations, but I will try. Loudly, slowly, and enunciate. When I was a little girl, someone asked me what my dad did for a living. I responded easily, "He's a lawyer." When I was subsequently asked what that means, I paused, unsure how to answer. I talked to my dad so I would be equipped the next time someone asked me. And of course, when next asked, "What does your father do?" I announced, "He creates value." I thought the attorneys might like that one. And sure, that was his job. But with a slightly different interpretation, that was his life too. He created value. He made every day better, more fun, more joyful, and a lot sillier. Our morning car rides to school were so fun. We sang along to Martha and the Vandellas' hit Heatwave, and we danced with our arms at stoplights. Any accomplishments, including but not limited to a good report card or just completing a Sunday Hebrew school session, was an occasion for a Slurpee at 7-Eleven. Yes, he made everything better. There is a ritual leading up to Passover where you place and then collect symbolic pieces of bread around your home. The next morning, all of that leavened bread, called chametz in Hebrew, It all gets burned with a prayer and not a whole lot of fanfare. Well, no fanfare does not do for Charlie Miller. He took that ritual and ramped it up to 11. Picture a flaming garbage can on the porch at Belmont Street with my father marching around it, with me and my siblings behind, naturally, chanting, "Chumid sticky, burn, burn, burn," for a good 5 minutes. And I found out much later in life that this is not the way that every Jewish family observes. So here's another good one. When my brother was 4 or 5, he had an imaginary friend named Bungie Gobbets. Well, my father co-opted Bungie Gobbets. He gave Bungie a whole family with identities and voices, arm movements, backstories, etc. In fact, Bungie, Baby, and Ethel Gobbets are our very close personal imaginary family friends. That said, just earlier this week, my siblings and mother and I went back and forth over how Ethel was related, definitely cousin, and if Baby was a boy or a girl, definitely a boy. The cast of characters grew to include more friends, including our imaginary friend Lux, who had an even more involved backstory and periodically sent the 3 of us $20 bills for walking around money. Our dad loved creating community, even if it wasn't grounded in reality. I must say, it's no wonder that every time I playfully ask my 5-year-old daughter Maya, the youngest of our dad's 6 incredible grandchildren, who he adored beyond measure. When I ask her, "How did you get so silly?" she always responds, "You want to say it?" "I got it from Grandpa." And if we were the luckiest to have him for a dad, and I say it emphatically, we are the luckiest. Think how lucky his grandkids are. All the fun, joy, and exuberance he delivered as a father, and none of the discipline. When I shared the news of our terrible loss to my 7-year-old son, Judah, he immediately wrote a poem for his grandpa. It was a beautiful rhyming ode, if maybe a little silly. And it would have overjoyed Grandpa, and Judah wanted me to share it. "My grandpa, he is so silly. I do not know if he likes his food dill-y. I love him so much, but he is not Dutch. He is the best grandpa in the world. He is on his bed when he is curled." Oh, the love is immense, and so is our loss. But the value he created endures. Thank you all so much for being here. It's really incredible to look out at all of these people. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to invite Danny, Andy, and maybe Emily.
Very hard to follow that. We want to come up and say a few words. I'm Andy, Elizabeth's husband. This is Danny, and Emily is in the front row. She chose not to come up, but I brought a story for her. Mark and I didn't talk about this, but I have 3 stories, just like Mark did, and I'm going to name them as 3 stories and go through them just like he did. They come from different areas of Charlie's life, and they encompass different parts of him, but they all encapsulate who he was. The first story starts in the back of a van in New Mexico 15 years ago. So apparently there is not a good airport in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So when you go to New Mexico, you fly to Albuquerque, and then you take an hour-long ride in the back of a van to Santa Fe, and you have to do that to get back. So I went to a conference, and let's just be clear, I am not a lawyer. It was not a lawyer conference. I was at a mental health conference. And I was on my way back to Albuquerque, tired, in the back of a van, and I struck up a conversation with the person next to me. And we began to exchange, hi, who are you, what do you do, where are you from, da-da-da. And he said, I'm from Maine. And I said, oh, my wife is from Maine. And I thought it would end there. And he said, oh, that's very nice. Who are her parents? Now, I had only been married to Elizabeth for 5 years at this point, so I knew her parents were kind of like a deal, but I didn't know how big a deal. So I said, Charlie and Ellie Miller. And without skipping a beat, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, Charlie Miller, pillar of the community. And every time somebody has asked me since then who Charlie Miller was, if they didn't know him, that's the story I tell. The second story was Emily's story, and has to do, our kids are twins, so they had their bar and bat mitzvah together, which is nice in some ways because, two people to break it up. But in that ceremony, you do the entire service. You don't do the Torah service. You do everything. You do all the prayers. They were expertly prepared because Grandma Ellie prepared them. So they knew all the prayers, and they were ready to go. But at 13, singing in front of a group like this, in a foreign language, is a little nerve-wracking. So a couple days before the big event, they were nervous, and I started laughing. And they were annoyed, like 13-year-olds are, and they said, why are you laughing, Dad? And I said, you don't understand. Each prayer, you just have to get the first word out. Grandpa Charlie will take it from there. And indeed, that is what happened. They got one word out. They kept going because they know all the words, but no one else heard all the words. Grandpa Charlie took it from there. And after that, at the end of the service, many people came up to us and said, and this is due in part to many of the other people in the room who were also at that service, and said, rarely in this shul have we had the kind of ruach, or spirit, that we had at your kids' B'nai Mitzvah. And that is due in large part to Charlie Miller. And when I told Mark I was going to tell this story yesterday, he said, well, let me tell you. When Eitan and Talia had their B'nai Mitzvahs, after our service, many people came up to us and said, Charlie Miller, he really did that. And I believe even changed the tune from the traditional tune in the shul. So I think that speaks, and you were mentioning this earlier, that speaks to Charlie Miller. The third story isn't ours. As Mark and Amanda and Lyd mentioned, we have received many messages. And we got a text message from everybody else has managed not to do this. We got a text message from a very dear friend of ours who shared a moment, because as many people have mentioned, Charlie knew lots of people's kids too. And so he wrote the following, and I just wanted to share it, because in a weird way it applies to his kids, but in a weird way it also applies to how he was with his grandkids as well. My affection for Grandpa Charlie goes back to, and is best explained by, a basketball. And he was a huge Celtics fan, for anybody who knows him as well. He was a warm and generous person, but when Sophie, their daughter, was at Palace Playland, she wanted a Syracuse basketball at the basketball throw booth, but didn't win. Your dad, referring to Elizabeth, quicker thinker than me, stepped up and kept throwing. To be fair, he was also a better shot than me. Until he won the basketball for Sophie. Sophie treasured that basketball. His immediacy and joy in the moment shined through. It carries through in the rest of his life and how he and Ellie raised each of their own children. I leave you with those three stories, and Danny had written up something that he would like to share as well, so I'll pass it on to my son.
Hello.
You just talk. You got the mic, you're good. He hasn't done this since his bar mitzvah, so, you know.
It's also the first suit I've worn since my bar mitzvah. We had to go buy that yesterday. To all, Grandpa Charlie was a mentor, peer, and role model, but to me he was my grandfather. I spent much time trying to figure out what to say or the right story to tell that would do him justice, but that is not possible. So forgive me that this will not compare to the true man he was, an amazing grandfather he was to all of his grandchildren. As you all have just heard, we Millers have a friend named Lux, whom our fantasy basketball league is named after, the Deluxe League. Now, although he was my grandfather, in fantasy basketball, he was my competition. Now, to put it in Celtics terms, I was like Magic's Lakers to his Celtics. There was one time he sent me a trade, and I added up all the averages of the players in the trade, and although it seemed reasonable at the time, let's just say I did not take the trade. Although he was my competitor in fantasy, when he came to my actual basketball game, he was my biggest fan. The one game he was at, I played the best game of my life. It is fair to say that his presence was felt. Another time when Grandpa Charlie was truly in his element was when he would lead a Passover Seder, as some of you may know. I would always want to sit by Grandpa Charlie because, you know, it's fun with all the toys, the puppets, and all the other things he did, but also because he slid me extra grape juice under the table. My Grandpa Charlie was truly larger than life and the best role model, competitor, fan, and grandpa man can ask for. He will be missed as no one can replace Grandpa Charlie. Thank you.
And I'd like to invite his sister-in-law, Sandy Bartel. This is for the normal-sized people.
Can you hear me? Looking out this morning, this is an astonishing turnout for a funeral. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And I have to say that Charlie would have loved the music, and more than that, he would have loved all the stories that the kids and the grandchildren have had to say, and he would have adored Judah's poem. But I don't give you so much my memories of Charlie, which are very, very special, but an account as I knew him. As I told him he was the big brother I never had and always wanted. So here it is. Charlie's work was all-consuming, and he loved the law and practicing it. But along with his professional accomplishments, his heart was in his home, in his marriage, and in his children, their spouses, and his grandchildren. Charlie married Ellie while they were both still in school, having promised their parents that both of them would finish college. They did as promised, and Mark, their oldest, came along for Ellie's graduation. Since they needed to stay where they were so that Ellie could finish, he taught English in high school for 7 years, and he mentored students and his debate team. Some of them grew to be friends with whom he maintained relationships for many years. Elizabeth, their second child, was born, and then Charlie decided on law school. Ellie worked throughout to put him through school, and his thesis brought him to the attention of Bernstein, Scher, Sawyer, and Nelson. He went to work there straight out of law school, and many years later eventually served as their managing partner. He never stopped working despite his retirement. At his death, he is still of counsel and could usually be found in his office. His burgeoning career was accompanied by the birth of Amanda, their third child. I don't think any 3 children were ever loved more or had a more devoted father. and the 6 grandchildren they gave him have been the light of his life. Charlie's 55-year marriage and partnership with Ellie brought him tremendous happiness. They worked together and served their community side by side, sharing their ideals. It was, as they say, a marriage made in heaven. His charity and pro bono work served a community above and beyond the Jewish community, to whom he was devoted. He served as president of his synagogue and president of the Jewish Community Alliance, and he provided a continuous source of advice and financial support, both to the local community, the larger Jewish community, and to the state of Israel. In the Jewish faith, it is considered a special blessing to be granted. It's a special blessing granted only to the righteous to die on the Sabbath. Given Charlie's passion for justice and his concern for tikkun olam, or the repair of the world, it seems only fitting that this special blessing was granted to him. He was a larger-than-life figure with a tremendous presence, a searching and seeking intelligence, an incredibly generous spirit, and he was a devoted and supportive husband, father, grandfather, brother, brother-in-law, uncle, and friend. A cousin described him as a man of joy. He spread happiness to his family and to everyone surrounding him. A light has surely gone out of all our lives, but his life serves as an inspiration to so many of us who can learn and emulate, and hopefully learn to bring joy. Thank you.
And I'd like to invite his brother. I wrote down Uncle Mike, but Mike Miller.
I wasn't sure if I could do this, but I decided this morning it's something I really wanted to do. So I'm not sure it's going to be as polished as everyone's else. I literally scribbled some notes this morning, and here it goes. And if I refer to my brother as Charles, it's our family used to call him Charles. So if you hear Charles, the rest of you know him as Charlie, of course. And it was true of Ellie, too. Her family called her Eleanor, but everybody else called her Ellie. Charles has been singing since he was a toddler. Of course, my mother, being so proud of him, called the supervisor of music where she used to teach school, who ended up hearing a rendition of Mares Eat Oats and Does Eat Oats and Little Lambs Eat Ivy. There was a combined elementary school chorus, and he was the person who got the solo in that. Cantor Sebrin, who was both his and my cantor, taught us to sing from the diaphragm. And he has been singing and had been singing and talking from the diaphragm ever since. A little aside, at Mark's bar mitzvah, I had Leah, and I came up and I started singing, and everybody, I realized that I had to step back from the microphone because both of us had the same cantor and mentor, sing from the diaphragm. And he was always a leader in Boy Scout camp, he earned his Eagle Scout. He was a song leader in Boy Scout camp. He was a leader in high school. a leader in the synagogue youth group. And everyone knew and loved Charlie Miller, as evidenced by the number of people here today. Let me do a little aside story. One time, Sarah was sent a book, my daughter Sarah, was sent a book from the family. And I know that Charles had it done because in it had all the names, it had Ellie's name, Mark's name, Elizabeth's name, Amanda's name. But after I read the book to her, where was Charles? Well, there was a clown in the book called Chuckles the Clown. And we figured that must be he. So he became Uncle Chuckles ever since then. Anyway, he was a force of nature, as we know, and he used his force for good. He used the force in loving his family, Ellie, Mark, Elizabeth, grandchildren, family, and friends, and always being by their side. He used his force as a teacher, caring about his students. He used his force as a leader of the synagogue, as a leader at the law firm, as a lawyer to help his clients. And as mentioned before, he loved being a lawyer. I remember him talking about one of the partners who still worked in the office when he was in his 80s. He would still come into the office. And Charles never saw himself retiring. He loved being a lawyer. And he worked at the office the week before he passed away. Excuse me. Drop. That's okay.
All right.
This helped. I could catch my breath. And I was almost done anyway. But thank you. Charles will be greatly missed by everyone he knew and loved.
Well, there must be a name for what I am in basketball terms, but I don't know it. It's kind of like I'm the sweep. I don't know it. Maybe it is very hard to come after so many eloquent, amazing comments, and but I'll begin. With apologies to the original author of the book of Genesis, I offer the following text. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. V'haaretz hayta tohu v'vohu v'choshech al pnei tehom. V'ruach Elohim mirachefet al pnei hamayim. V'yomer Elohim yehi or. V'yehi Yechezkel ben Dov ber v'doranit. I'll translate. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was chaotic, and darkness was all over the face of the depths. And the breath of God swept over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." and there was Charlie Miller. It will come as no surprise to you that in high school, Charlie was awarded the senior with the most school spirit. And now that I know even more, I'm sure that happened kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Those bright eyes, huge smile, and booming voice filled the room. Anyone who has heard Charlie sing or laugh or speak or even dance knows the light and spirit and life he brought into almost every situation. As a lawyer, as a teacher, and as a community leader, he sought to bring order into chaos. His reasoned approach, his careful and persuasive use of language, even his demeanor often brought clarity to a fuzzy situation. I remember during board meetings that he might bring up a friendly amendment to others' comments. It wasn't always pleasant to disagree with Charlie, as he was strong in his beliefs, but somehow things worked out. The friendly amendment stood and peace reigned. Other times, he would purposely bring chaos into the event. Silly, fun, deliberately challenging chaos just to rile things up. For example, I generally don't give sermons. Usually I try to find some topic in the Torah portion of the week that will elicit conversation. Sometimes my ideas fall flat and no one makes a comment. But Charlie, with that mischievous face of his, would take a deep breath and say, "But Rabbi," and he would bring some life into the discussion. Sometimes he would say something that made Ellie cringe. She would say a few words under her breath, and he would kind of listen and then keep going. Eventually, a good conversation ensued, and he would sit back, his job done. On other occasions, I'd see him with the kids from Kadima Bethel, his guitar and keyboard close by. Charlie, the same person who during the week would be professionally dressed to the nines, would be wearing a crazy multicolored wig with a bunch of Mardi Gras necklaces hanging from his neck. He'd be handing out marimbas and eggs and sharing that mischievous smile, and everyone would sing, adults and kids together. Dinosaurs knocking at our doors, rolling up the Torah instead of rolling down the river. Something about rabbis at the podium, one of my favorites. Whatever he sang with gusto. Generations of kids will remember singing with Charlie. I'm not sure how we're going to break this news to them. And let me tell you about Charlie's voice at our services, which I thought it was just here, who knew? I like to sing, so we sing a lot. Sometimes we sound okay. Sometimes we sound pretty good. Sometimes we sound like the chaos that existed before the world was created. We lovingly call this the Purim Choir. As soon as Charlie entered the room, it filled with song and harmony and swing. I usually have my back to the congregation when I lead, but I knew when Charlie walked in. Pete Seeger, one of my heroes, and maybe one of Charlie's, used to say that you need that bass voice to hold up everyone else. By the way, Mike, there'll be auditions following this. Boy, was that true of Charlie. And Charlie also had that Baruch Hu et Adonai. We also jump. I didn't know it was thanks to his cantor and the cantor's understanding of diaphragms, so that didn't come out right. Anyway, you know what I mean. We are bereft without his voice. I don't think it can be replaced. Now, this may sound tangential, but I just have to mention it. Have you ever seen Charlie and Ellie dance? For two intellectual people, two people who you might think would be somewhat staid, they would cut up the rug. Hopefully they didn't see me watching them, but I would smile like the Cheshire Cat. It just made me so happy to see them so happy and carefree. They met when they were young, and it was love at pretty much first sight. There were debates and opinions and disagreements and laughter, love and mutual support. I was astonished to find out that one of Charlie's first gifts to Ellie after they met was a duck named Rover Chester Arthur. Silly and serious at the same time. I too could go on and on telling Charlie stories and never be finished. We all can. Whether it was complete and total love of his family, love and devotion to friends, and a different yet still powerful love and care for clients, co-workers, those in need, those who were privileged, the Jewish community, the greater community at large. Charlie's stature matched his love and care for all of us. He was a pro at raising money, and many organizations, including ours, have Charlie, his persuasive personality, and his friends to thank for that. I even think there was some legal thing about my house when I bought it 30 years ago. Not only did Charlie take care of it, but he and my realtor reached into their pockets and pooled their money together so that I could have the basement cleaned. I think I spent it on food after I paid for the house. There was no end to Charlie's generosity. Just as the light that was created at the beginning of time still shines, so too will Charlie's light continue to shine. But to be sure, I think for anyone who experienced Charlie Miller, the world's light has diminished. He was taken away from us way too early. There is still much work to be done, friendly amendments to be made, dances to be danced, and songs to be sung. But Charlie's voice and Charlie's spirit cannot and never could be quieted. It will be for us to take his best qualities and carry them on to the many generations that will follow. I don't think he was ready to let this life go. But as I keep learning, it's not up to us. In our grief and our anguish, and especially in our laughter and our love, Charlie's voice and Charlie's spirit will always be present. Zichrono livracha, may Charlie's memory be for a blessing. I close this section of eulogies with a prayer. Eloah Slichot, God of forgiveness, you who are gracious and compassionate, patient and abundantly kind, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to Charlie's soul. Send comfort to your children who grieve, and help us to meet grief with courage and to face our sorrow undaunted. Help us to treasure what is ours now because Charlie has lived. Should despair threaten or faith falter, sustain us all, Adonai, for you are our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help in troubled times. And let us say, Amen. Following the chant, one more, yes. Absolutely, closing.
Sorry, Rabbi, you were almost there.
No, I just didn't look at my card.
We have one more thing from my mother. And these are her words. I've asked my children to speak for me because I know I couldn't get through the words I want to say. They're stronger than I am, just like their father. First, I want to thank all of you for the kindness of your messages and your presence here today. I'm sure Charlie would have loved this large turnout. More than that, he somehow would have managed to thank each and every one of you. The last week was, you'll all understand, the most difficult one of my life. That said, we are all grateful for the days the kids and I got to spend with Charlie. We got to share lots of wonderful memories with him and to move seamlessly, an overstatement for sure, through many songs we sang for him, mostly Motown and other 60s favorites, to Hebrew prayers and melodies. We kept telling him we needed him to sing with us, to keep us on key and provide his gorgeous harmonies. As things got worse, I had more and more memories of our early days together, and I focused on the details of our wedding. One of these was the songs we had chosen. During the ceremony, the song I chose for him was Till the End of Time. It was an old song then, and I guess not many people know or remember it. That said, I recited the words to him at virtually the last moment we shared together. And I want to have them read to you now, for aside from all the wonderful things he did and all the wonderful things he was the love of my life then, now, and always.
Till the end of time, long as stars are in the blue, long as there's a spring, a bird to sing, I'll go on loving you. Till the end of time, long as roses bloom in May, my love for you will grow deeper with every passing day.
Till the wells run dry and each mountain disappears, I'll be there for you to care for you through laughter and through tears. So take my heart in sweet surrender and tenderly say that I'm the one you love and live for till the end of time.
Following interment, following the El Maleh Rachamim, we'll gather at Temple Bethel Memorial Park. Everybody is welcome to follow us and to be present for the burial. And then we do what we Jews do, which is in sorrow and in happiness, which is to eat. And you are all welcome to come back here for the meal of consolation. And then Shiva will be observed tonight from 7 to 9 with services at 7. Tuesday through Thursday, they'll be sitting from 4 to 6 and then 7 to 9 with services at 7. And Friday from 3 to 6, no services. And then Saturday evening services are at 8:30. Out in the hallways, there are directions to Charlie and Ellie's house. There's also a reminder of when Shiva times are. You do not have to be Jewish to come to the Shiva. It's really an opportunity to be together, to share stories, for laughter and for tears, and to support one another in this really sad time. Families also ask that should you wish to offer a donation in Charlie's memory, that you consider, they have it in categories. Tikkun Olam, you consider Temple Bethel and or the Jewish Community Alliance, both of which they are very involved in. The Gulf of Maine for the environment, the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, and for equal access to justice, Pine Tree Legal, and for inclusion and diversity, Hope Acts. But this is all like in the newspaper and all around, and I'm sure wherever you would like to offer a donation, Charlie would be thrilled. I invite you now to rise for closing El Mali Rachamim. I did forget to say, as you're rising, so much love is here, and so much of the Miller family has come, and in-laws. Everything okay? Yeah, okay, good. Oh, okay. Phew. And at any rate, they also wanted me to thank each and every one of you for being here. El Male Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Akia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Yechezkel Ben Dov Ber V'Doranit, Shalach Lolamo, Began Eden Tehei Menuchato, Ana Bal Rachamim, Hastirei V'Seter Knafecha Lolamim, Utzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'nomar Amen. El Male Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Charles E. Miller, Yechezkel Ben Dov Ber V'Doranit, who is gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that Charlie find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. know, it's chilly. That's what I said. Are people cold? I couldn't tell if it was just up here or. I think, so many people, they want to make sure air was